episode 5, and this week we're talking about regulations. Jamie Zammitt joins me on the podcast to give his insights in regards to regulations and how it has affected Gibraltar. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Learn Cardano podcast, where we break down all the concepts of Cardano so you can be that annoying person that won't shut up about cryptocurrencies at your next family gathering. It couldn't be any worse than a person that has just discovered vegetarianism. But anyway, I have an interview with Jamie Zammitt all the way from Gibraltar, and he joins me on the show to talk about regulation. I actually had this episode lined up before Charles Hoskinson did a live YouTube video in regards to regulation and all the hype that's happening around certain cryptocurrencies at the moment. So it's probably really good timing to have this conversation with Jamie. But just before I get into the news updates for this week and the interview, I just wanted to do a shout out for one of the podcast reviews. And I'll just read this one out here that I've got from Argentina. I think out of all the years I've done podcasting, this is my first review from Argentina. It reads, I found the podcast on Spotify and became a quick fan. I'm exploring Cardano because the project seems amazing, and while trying to look for a good podcast, came through this one, which is really clear and with good information. Keep doing it. Greetings from Argentina, Federico. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for the 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Now, you can find this podcast on pretty much every network out there, but it really helps if you leave a 5-star rating and review on the Apple Podcast Network. It really helps with the discoverability of the podcast in general, especially on all those iOS devices. So if you can, please leave a rating and review. It really helps with the podcast. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the news. So first off, we have some potential groundwork happening for Cardano's annual summit in 2022. There was a live Spaces event held on Twitter by Ben O'Hanlon, and he was trying to get ideas and people to pitch locations from around the world where we could potentially hold an annual summit for Cardano. Now, people joined a live Spaces event where they were pitching potential location ideas and how to hold virtual conferences. With the state of the world as it is at the moment and cost of travel, etc., it may be very hard for people to actually connect and meet in person. So we may see a lot of satellite and mini events around the world to connect to a main global annual summit. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out and to actually merge some of the virtual conferences and virtual meetings that we're having these days into a more physical space. That'll be absolutely amazing to see. I know here in Australia, we're pretty much out of the whole situation of lockdowns and stuff with almost zero cases and zero infections besides the ones that are coming into the country recently in hotel quarantine. But in regards to actually meeting up with people and talking about Cardano, that would be absolutely exciting. We had our first local meetup here on the Gold Coast here in Australia just last Friday, and it was small and the community is still growing, but it was so good to actually connect with people and talk to people in person and explain to them various different concepts about Cardano and learn from their experiences as well. So I can't wait to actually meet people in person and connect on a more meaningful level. I know from previous experience in other open source communities that I used to work in, going to those conferences, the collaboration that you get out of them and the conversations and things that you learn usually happen over a glass of beer or a glass of wine, and the networking sessions afterwards where you actually get to know one another and collaborate on some pretty cool ideas and projects. So that's what I'm really looking forward to, connecting with people and finding out what cool ideas you can potentially work on in the future. So whenever this happens, if it happens, I'll be there for sure. Podcast mic in one hand and beer in the other. I cannot wait. Now, the other big piece of news I'd like to mention this week is the Cardano Africa special. So this is happening a couple of days after this podcast is released on the 29th of April. What month is it? April. Oh my God, it's April already. Well, it's in replacement of the big Cardano 360 event that happens at the end of every month. So it seems to get bigger and bigger every month. And this one is focusing specifically on the Africa movements in Cardano. I don't know if it's the Cardano deal that is happening in regards to Ethiopia or another African nation. The details are quite sparse there, but we do believe it's Ethiopia. And we'll see what will happen at this big Cardano 360 or Cardano Africa event, whatever it is. You can find out more information about it and sign up for the newsletter and news announcements at africa.cardano.org. You can find out more information about the event there, when it's held, and how to access it. Hopefully this is the little bit of news that we're after. All right. Now, the final piece of news that I'd like to mention, I've got a little bit of a live AMA or a Ask Me Anything event at the end of this week on Friday. I think it's 10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and that's about 1 p.m. in London, United Kingdom, and 8 a.m. in New York, United States. So hopefully from there you can work out the rough times when this event will be on. I guess I'll be discussing what happens at this Africa Cardano event, as well as the stake pool that we own and operate. I'm giving everyone an update in the profitability and the things that we've done in regards to building up the stake for the pool, and also talking about the podcast, some plans that we have for the podcast in regards to a token, and some other little exciting things, but I will just leave the teaser as that. You can find more information about the AMA event on the show notes for this podcast episode at cardano.com.au/EP005. Okay, and with that, the news is out of the way. Let's get into the main topic for this episode, regulations. To get into mainstream investing, for example, shares or ETFs, exchange-traded funds, commodities, and even property, there's a fair amount of hurdles and government regulations to get through to be able to participate. In countries where proving your identity and asset ownership is even harder due to lack of documentation, official records, or changes to these records due to government regulation or even corruption, it's virtually impossible to get into investing. You will find yourself needing to trade in that local government's desired currency, such as the US dollar, to trade for certain commodities, for example, oil. Or you'll need large sums of cash to participate, or you may be completely blocked by government legislation and regulation, such as here in Australia, their decision to block external investments into Australia based on sovereignty and security conversations. Now, this happens anywhere in the world, and lots of local governments do like to protect their own local interests, and that's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. That's all the regulations that are in place to help protect people, protect the local economy, and protect the sovereignty of the country. Now, I'd like to bring in my guest, Jamie Zammitt, all the way from Gibraltar, who lives in a state where regulation-friendly policies have enabled blockchain-related companies to really thrive there in Gibraltar. So let's bring Jamie onto the segment here. Jamie, thank you for joining me on the podcast. Now, could you just let all of our listeners and viewers know a little bit about yourself and how you got into the crypto space?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Gibraltar. It's this tiny place many of you might never have heard of. It's an overseas territory, British overseas territory, on the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula. So southern tip of Spain, effectively. So where you come into the Mediterranean Sea and you exit into the Atlantic Ocean, that's called, that little bit of water there, that's called the Straits of Gibraltar. So we're one of the tiniest places on this planet, around 33,000 people population. So very, very small indeed. But we do punch above our weight in many areas. So I'm sure we'll get into a bit of that. And in terms of myself, I'm a part-time magician. Obviously, COVID has been very hard for entertainers all around the world. I entertain kids and adults. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back into full throttle on that soon. I've been in other industries, the financial services industry. I'm now been dabbling in the cryptocurrency industry for a while. I'm invested in stocks as well. I share a few other passions, but maybe we'll go into those if and when as we proceed with this chat.
So before we start, any chance we can see a magic trick?
I had a funny feeling you'd ask that.
Now, unfortunately, the magic trick doesn't really translate too well on audio podcast, so you're going to have to check out the video of it on our YouTube channel for Learn Cardano. So please check that out if you want to see the magic trick. Now, Gibraltar being a very small country of 33,000 population, it's agile enough to move and work with certain regulations to benefit the country itself. So Jamie explains what the digital ledger framework is and how that has really benefited Gibraltar.
Back in around 2017, Gibraltar sent out kind of a consultation process paper to many people in related industries, so finance, the lawyers in the country, accountants, etc., and even people in the crypto space back then, to try and formulate some sort of legal framework for distributed ledger technology, blockchain, right? Gibraltar has always been at the forefront for many of these newer industries in that respect, and have done so very successfully. Financial services have been, really, really dominant in Gibraltar and very successful in Gibraltar for some of the major household brands in that space. Insurance industries and sectors as well. I think there's 1 in 5 cars in the UK, in mainland UK, is actually insured via Gibraltar, which is a staggering amount.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and then the online space, online gaming is massive in Gibraltar, and it has been. Gibraltar jumped on it quickly because it's small, it can react. Bureaucracy is far more reduced in a small place. There's not as much red tape. Things can move, right? We can, and that's the benefit that we have. We don't have the clout of the big financial services centers like the Londons and the New Yorks, right, and the Singapores. Yeah. You can't compete with them at a pound-to-pound level. So you need to find ways where you can get that kind of edge. And one of them is being pragmatic in that sense, where you can move quickly and try and accommodate people who are seeking for clarity. So this DLT framework was the first one in the world to offer potential investors or people looking at where to house their blockchain-related businesses some sort of clarity. Gibraltar, just like I mentioned, all these other industries have never looked at regulation as a way to stifle industries. Regulators can do that, and I think in many countries that can happen. I think the US, which is probably part of the reason we've seen a couple of red days in the last few days, a bit of panic after some news that the regulators are going to step in. Look, it's going to happen, right? The regulators are going to. We can't keep on moving the huge amounts of money that we are. Without getting the attention of regulators. If anyone thinks that they're going to stay away forever, then you've got something else coming. That it's just a matter of time. But I think there's 2 things to regulation. You can either create regulation where you create, you define and you provide clarity and facilitate the industry, and with that you enhance confidence in that particular field.
Yeah. At
the same time, you provide an acknowledgement of the space, right? You're accepting your space. If a government regulates a space, it's admitting that it recognizes a space of something worthy, right? And that, I think, is underestimated by many people. The opposite end of the spectrum is that you can have regulators whose motivation is to stifle an industry, and that is dangerous, and that is what we probably fear. Whether that's what's coming for most people, we don't know. Gibraltar, if we're going back to your question, I think Gibraltar's always tried to encourage investment, to encourage industries, especially early on, to get that first mover advantage as a jurisdiction, because we can't compete pound to pound, as we said. So it's always been very embracing of, in terms of its regulation, making sure that customers are protected. But, those companies need to be audited in the ways that most companies expect to be audited, that they have their books in order, that they have financial obligations that they can satisfy if something were to go wrong, to prove that they have, some sort of real backing behind it. All these things are just obvious stuff, but at the moment it's not happening, or it's not obligatory for it to happen. So that's not all those things I just described. Those are not necessarily bad things for you and I as a consumer. On the contrary, that's actually a good thing. So I think it's that kind of balance. We talk about regulation as at this high level, as in all encompassing, and it's all the same everywhere. And that's where regulators come in. And I think they can either be good for the space or they can be bad for the space, and that's up to them where they want to position themselves.
Now, I have links on the show notes in regards to Gibraltar's DLF, and you can read up more about that and how this type of regulation has really helped the country. Now, I asked Jamie further, what companies have actually really benefited from this framework? Yeah,
so there are a few. I mean, to name a few, we've got some consultancy companies which are related within the space in terms of, helping people get into the space. Tag Consultancy is one of them, for example. We've got eToro X, which is the eToro, the wallet arm of the eToro company, which I'm sure most of you are all familiar with. We got Tap, which is a kind of money company where you can trade cryptocurrencies in and out from quite easily and have on and off ramps. And one in particular, which I think has been really, really successful, and I think is worthy mentioning a bit more about, is Digital Asset Management, DAM. So they're kind of a crypto payments company. So I think they have over 350 merchants at the moment worldwide, and they're offering them that kind of fiat to crypto gateway, which at the moment it's not necessarily what the pure crypto enthusiasts want, right? Which is crypto, just keep crypto as crypto. But I think it's a first natural step where you're gonna get that confidence from industries and players out there who want to look at how they can accept crypto, but probably don't want that exposure of that volatility. So they come into play with these types of companies that offer them on and off ramps where customers can pay in crypto, but they offer an immediate conversion into fiat and they escape that volatility. But they also offer like an OTC trade desk and some cold storage solutions as well to customers who might want that. If that's what they're seeking. So they're being really, I mean, they've gone through the roof in the last year or two. I think they've only been in existence for 2 years, if that. And they're growing exponentially. Great team behind them. And I think we need to watch that space and that particular company because you start probably hearing them outside of Gibraltar as well.
So it's really good to see that the regulatory framework that was set up has really attracted companies to set up blockchain-related businesses in Gibraltar. So in doing so, they get given a license of some sort to do their operations, and this helps protect users that are investing in the company and ensures that the company doesn't do anything untoward the customers so that they can keep their licenses. Now, in Charles Hossenson's latest video, or one of his latest videos in regards to regulation, he mentioned something called the bit license. And this is what he has to say about it.
I'm old enough to remember what happened with bit license. And I remember when the people pushing bit license reached out to us in industry and we all talked about it, and they did the exact opposite. And they created a situation where New York State is now one of the worst places in the United States to run a cryptocurrency business, and very few people can qualify for bit license and get through that entire process, despite having spent, some cases, millions of dollars chasing it. The people who came up with that policy are now the same people who are kind of running the Treasury Department and follow that same philosophy. I just don't believe it. I could be wrong, and perhaps my skepticism is undeserved, but it is my belief regulation's coming.
Now, where BitLicense has, I guess, failed for the New York State and being able to start a blockchain-related business in the US there, on the flip side, these licenses have worked in the benefit for these blockchain companies in regards to, I guess, making consumers and investors feel a lot more comfortable in regards to investing and working with these blockchain-related companies. And this is what Jamie had to say about it.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. That's the clarity that I was mentioning earlier, right? So
Yeah.
like, for these companies I've mentioned in Gibraltar in particular, of which there are others, right? But I mean, we could talk about it all day. These companies who now have a license, an authority by the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission to operate a blockchain-related business in Gibraltar. As a consumer, you now know that there is a reputable government, British-based government with British rule of law that is overseeing these activities and at least requiring that those companies behave in a certain way that us as consumers expect them to behave if they're dealing with anything related to us. So if they always have a threat of that license being revoked, as a consumer, that is definitely something that you would be looking for, because those companies are going to make sure that they don't get their license revoked, because reputably that could be the end of it, right?
Yeah.
If you have a license and it's revoked,
that could be a company.
That's the end, right? Now, if you don't have any and you never want any, like you're saying, you're probably one of these who go in the gray areas, but who knows what's going to happen to those tomorrow. And if you're holding stuff on your exchanges, for example, which obviously it boggles the mind that some people still do that type of stuff, but people still do, which defeats the whole purpose of decentralization in the first place. But anyway, if those people are not willing to tick all the boxes that they know are going to be asked of them tomorrow if they were to be regulated, then your assets held with those companies are definitely in danger. I mean, I wouldn't leave them there. So, I mean, like I said before, it's one of those, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Regulation is seen as a bad thing by many people. I don't think it does have to be a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, but if done the right way in the country, we're going to attract a lot of money that's never, ever taken this space for seriously before. And those people who have always had those seeds of doubt in their mind, all those will seek more confidence in the space. For you and I, probably we don't need that, but we're not in the majority. Remember, this is still a very, very tiny space when you look at the bigger scheme of things.
Now, looking around the world, we have seen more news articles and posts and information about other countries around the world taking a stronger stance on regulation and banning or potentially banning cryptocurrencies for certain aspects. So we saw in India, I think last month, in regards to regulation, mentioning that they're thinking about banning cryptocurrencies, taking a step back and then saying they're thinking about regulations about cryptocurrencies. So all these little aspects have some sort of factor and impact on the industry and market prices as well. We also saw something in Turkey potentially banning or payment of goods and services through cryptocurrencies. And also the United States has announced that it will be looking at regulations in regards to cryptocurrencies. There was a post on Fox News in regards to it, and Charles Hoskinson also talks about it in his last video around regulation too. This is what he had to say about it.
There is no reality that a government as regulation friendly as the United States government will allow an industry with a market capitalization of over $1 trillion to be unregulated or to live in this weird gray area of enforcement.
So regulation is coming, especially in the United States. Over the next few months, I guess we'll see the Biden administration set forth some ideas and proposal in regards to what may actually happen. Now, Charles also said if this regulation is going in the wrong direction, they'll be doing everything in their power to be lobbying against this newly proposed regulation if it isn't in favor of the industry. Lobbying is a big part of American politics, and it is the main way things get done in US politics. So it would be great to see some action, some movement there. The rest of the world usually does follow suit in regards to what the United States does in regards to regulation and so forth. So setting the initial groundwork, I guess, is rather important. So I'd hate to see something like the media buying regulation laws that were passed here in Australia get passed around the rest of the world. It could have been a lot worse, actually. Now, Jamie points out a couple of other countries that have passed some sort of regulation or has announced or spoken about some regulation within their borders.
Yeah, Nigeria also did something, right? I think it was the central bank who started saying that they were going to ban cryptocurrency trading, but then the SEC came out. Their equivalent of the SEC came out in Nigeria saying, "What are you doing, central government? Don't do this. You're affecting loads of our own people who are now, they were making money from investment from outside, and we can't make people 100,000 all of a sudden, like our own people. Let them, if they can make it, let them bring that wealth here,
Yeah.
There's a lot of
why cut the money tree down? let it grow.
Exactly. But you're seeing, like you said, the Indias, the Nigeria, Turkey have now said that you can't buy goods and services with crypto. I think that they've kind of been a bit more kind of brave in doing that. But I think the more Western world countries with much bigger economies, I think no one really wants to be the one to put their neck on the line and calling the shots so early like this. I think there's a lot more twists and turns to go. And
so whatever regulation we see come in place in whatever jurisdiction you may be in, it's probably a good idea to keep an eye on what's happening. If a rule or regulation comes into place that affects a certain exchange that you may be purchasing and holding your cryptocurrencies on, you may want to jump out of that exchange very quickly. Or, better still, not have any of your cryptocurrencies on that exchange in the first place, or on any exchange. Any exchange could be affected. Furthermore, understanding how your country that you reside in treats cryptocurrencies as assets or as utility tokens, how it is looked at in terms of security. Knowing these aspects will help maximize your income tax return and minimize your tax. Now, I'll get on a tax expert in the future in regards to this to talk about how cryptocurrencies are looked at in certain countries. I'll probably get one here from Australia and another one from the United States. If anyone knows of any, I would love to have them on the podcast and talk to them a little bit more about taxation and how cryptocurrencies are viewed in the eyes of the government. Some other regulations that were passed, I think late last year in 2020, were around privacy coins, or ones like Monero, where it is harder to find who actually owns or who's using that particular cryptocurrency because it's all well hidden within its ledger. Now, those ones have disappeared off a lot of exchanges. Monero was one that I was actually mining quite a bit on my CPU, on the laptop that I've got here. And it was easy to do. You could just spin up a little mining app and it would mine Monero and just send it off to your wallet. But in taking it off those particular exchanges and looking poorly at them or banning them, I can't remember the ruling around it exactly. They've all disappeared. So I can no longer mine that particular cryptocurrency, and it's actually very hard to exit out and sell anything off. So it's very important to monitor whatever cryptocurrency you're into to make sure none of the government policies and regulations affect it, so you can safely hold and store it and do with it what you will. Right, so I have the full interview with Jamie Zammitt, including the magic trick little thing that he does at the beginning, and his full conversation around Gibraltar, its regulation framework, and also a special app that he had built in regards to the gig economy and how he could potentially integrate it into Cardano. So it's a really interesting conversation there. And if you want to hear more of it, you can find it on our YouTube channel. You can find the links to it on our website or in the show notes for this podcast episode. Now that wraps up another podcast episode for us. You may have noticed, if you're a long-time listener, a long time as in the whole 4 other episodes I've created, I've changed the format slightly in this one here. I've gone for a more narration style where I'm cutting and slicing interview snippets from my guests that I have on and also other video sources such as Charles's videos. And it's a little bit different. It takes a little bit more time to edit and piece together the story and the narrative that I'm trying to put together. And I would love your feedback in regards to it. Do you prefer this style of format where it's a little bit more narrative, or do you prefer the other format where I talk about a particular topic and then get our guest in to talk about their field of expertise? What do you prefer? Let me know on Twitter or in the comments for the podcast episode. I would love to know. That way I can steer the podcast in particular directions. Now, don't forget, we have that AMA session on this Friday, 30th, right after the Cardano Africa event on our YouTube channel. So please make sure you jump on that and join in on the conversation there and join in with the rest of the community who will be talking about all things Cardano Africa, the podcast, and who knows what else. We'll see where it takes us. One last thing. I should probably do the Crypto Steel draw there. So we're giving away one of those Crypto Steel capsules to securely store away your, what was it called? The seed phrase for your wallet. That special little seed phrase that you could use to restore your wallet on any other device. It's fireproof, it's waterproof. Well, if you drop it off a boat, you may not be able to recover it again. But, if it's burning down in your house, you may be able to crawl through the ashes and find that little capsule and restore your seed key. So it's one way to actually recover your seed phrase. And we talk about it with some other guests in the future as well. I've got one already lined up, but I'll draw that on that AMA. So this is your last chance to enter that competition. You can do so by going to the Twitter account for this podcast, Cardano AU, and on there's a pinned tweet. All you have to do is quote tweet that. That's quote tweet it and tell us why you love Cardano so much. And out of all those entries, I will pick that lucky winner during the AMA. All right. So until next time, everyone, I guess I'll see you at Cardano Africa and see what is being announced at that big event. Until next time, everyone, bye.